So, one of the biggest mistakes parents make while trying to help their kids on their path to medicine is coddling. So, let's talk about what coddling is. Coddling is any behavior that essentially fixes a problem for your child when they should be developing skills or habits to overcome challenges instead. This presents in a bunch of ways. For example, getting tutoring, being on your child's back to make sure they hit deadlines, checking in with them a little too frequently. These are all different levels of coddling, and they can have, a great impact on your kid's ability to succeed later on in medicine. So I like to think about it in terms of this graph, and down here we will put challenge level. So this is basically just the difficulty as your kid moves through school. Actually, this is going to go up here. Down here, what's actually going to go is the timeline. So just to rephrase, this axis is going to represent progression towards medical school, whereas this higher axis here is going to represent the challenge level that each one of those phases will show. So just to make things easy, we'll call the very beginning here middle school, then we'll call this area high school, then over here college, then over here medical school, and eventually residency. And the unfortunate truth is, as you progress through each of these stages on your path to medical school, your challenges are only going to grow exponentially. And I know this, I'm a second-year medical student, and this has been the experience of virtually everyone I've spoken to. And this is pretty obvious, right? Middle school's honestly pretty easy, high school's harder than middle school, but college is significantly harder than high school, and then obviously medical school and residency are some of the most difficult academic journeys that anyone could make. So, like I said, the challenge level naturally grows over time, and kids need a certain level of skill or habit in order to succeed throughout all these levels of schooling. Most kids don't start with their competency all the way up here, right? That would be ridiculous. You wouldn't expect a middle schooler to be able to handle the workload of a resident or even a college student. In general, a lot of people start kind of in this rough range, where they're able to succeed pretty well in middle school and most of high school, but then they start facing some difficulties in college or medicine. And so that's kind of where I was, right? I was a pretty good student throughout middle school because my skill level exceeded the challenge level that was present there. Right about here in high school, I hit one of my first roadblocks in my educational career. So I took a course called pre-calculus, and I took it slightly early in order to have a good GPA and resume to get into a good college. And I didn't have the prerequisite skills to do as well as I could have in that class, meaning my study habits were not that efficient, and my discipline was not that great. So naturally, in this event, my outcomes saw a dip. So by outcomes, I'm referring to my grades, obviously. And because I wasn't studying as well as I should have been, my grades suffered. This was the first time I'd ever gotten B's and C's in class. Before this, I was an all-A student. Now, when this happened, what my response should have been was I should have started working on those skills I just mentioned, study skills and discipline. And I should have raised my competency so that I could overcome that increase in challenge and continue to succeed. But in reality, my parents and I were very concerned at the sudden drop in GPA. And as a result, we immediately went for the outcome-fixing measure, which was getting a tutor. And the difficult thing to identify with coddling is that it actually does work in the short run. So my skill level stayed pretty low, right? I wasn't more disciplined and I didn't improve my study techniques. But having a tutor allowed me to kind of fill in this gap in challenge. And so my outcomes actually did improve and I began to get A's in pre-cal again. However, the problem with this approach is it becomes a crutch. Your skill level doesn't improve, and eventually, when that crutch is no longer sufficient, you're going to end up paying for it. So in my case, this crutch worked pretty well all the way until I hit organic chemistry in college. So organic chemistry is known to be a very difficult course that almost every pre-med student takes. And it's not really viable to get a tutor in college for organic chemistry, just because you have more frequent examinations, you're moving through material faster, and that's more specialized knowledge, so the tutors are going to be quite expensive. So as a result, again, my skill level was all the way down here. But now, instead of just making this tiny bump up over here, I had to cover this entire ground while also being a college student. And that was unfortunate because now I had to cover a greater gap in skill in a shorter amount of time while it mattered more. And by it, I mean the outcomes. This was an unfortunate situation. Luckily, I managed to pull myself through it. The way I did that was I went back to my parents, but this time instead of focusing on a solution that would just fix the outcome, like a tutor, I asked them to help me invest in courses that taught me the prerequisite skills and habits needed to succeed. So I invested in study courses and various discipline programs and all this sort of stuff. And that luckily helped me grow my competency and habits and skills needed at a pretty fast rate compared to what it otherwise might have taken. And I was able to catch up in time for medical school. Now, there are a few problems with this approach. First of all, it's completely unnecessary, right? If I had just done that over here, I would have been on a positive trajectory that would have saved me a lot of pain down here. The other problem is when you fix these problems in an early stage, you don't have that much of a drop in outcome because the challenge level is just starting to exceed your capabilities. And so you can make that up relatively fast. If you address these problems at the late stage, that challenge level you're facing has far exceeded your current capabilities. And so it's going to take more effort and potentially longer to overcome that gap. And finally, a drop in outcome all the way over here in college is going to matter a lot more than in high school or in middle school. And that only becomes more and more true the further your kid gets along his or her medical journey. If I had taken that drop in grade in high school, I may or may not have gotten into a college that was a tier lower, but then I would have had the skills needed to succeed and potentially get into an even better medical school. However, because I took the drop in GPA in college, that did hinder my ability to get into a higher tier medical school by a decent margin. Now, if I made the same mistake although in medical school, that might have even set me back a year on my path towards medicine, or it might have even kicked me out completely. So, just to summarize, coddling is bad because, as you can see, it prevents students from growing their skills when they need to, and instead provides them a crutch that's eventually going to break down. And a good alternative to this process is to invest in skills and habits that help your child succeed in medicine instead of investing in outcome-focused but ultimately ineffective techniques such as tutoring.